Marisa, thank you so very much for the wonderful welcome and good evening to everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here on so many counts. First of all, to be able to now look out into the audience and see some very familiar faces that make me really feel that I'm back here at home. To see faces that are new to me, that give me the opportunity to believe in the future of meeting, making new friendships, new partnerships, but I think mostly to recognize that we're all here together in a common cause for the betterment not only of Ireland, but I think also the role that Ireland can and must play in making a better world that we live in and as a global society. Lastly, I think for me, this is a very special journey being able to be a speaker at this particular lecture series that honors and remembers Ray Murphy. I am one who can really be happy to claim, having known Ray, not very personally, having met him a few times because we worked in sister institutions. While he was at Mott, I was at the Ford Foundation, and had the opportunities in various times to be able to at least be acquainted, and we had so many friends and colleagues in common. In fact, when I shared with my colleagues and friends the fact that I had this great honor, there were so many tributes and memories that they shared with me to tell me about things that I wouldn't have known about Ray, from anywhere from childhood, throughout early adulthood, throughout his professional life, the things that really mattered to him personally. And as I did sort of share my speech with them in advance, and they said, wow, these kinds of things that you're going to say this evening would resonate so much with Ray. He really would have agreed with you on such and such a point. He would be proud that somebody also believes in these other things. And so I really do dedicate my words to not only his memory, but I think also to the causes that when one thinks of Ray Murphy, they think of as well. So I feel very, very well placed being here tonight and being able to have these words. I think I've already proven it, but I will still forewarn you that I am a former professor. So very early in my life, I received lifetime tenure as an associate professor, and that was a while ago, so I am very, very deeply steeped in the tradition of highly verbal communications, okay? And yet, to protect you from that, what I want to do is to share with you both the limits of what I expect to cover this evening and also give you a summary up front. And even in giving that to you, that does not give you license, however, to exit early. I will be checking the roster out there for names, and I believe I've been told there are security videos somewhere here I can check afterwards. Well, so 3 points that I really hope to get across this evening are these. Number one, that our world finds itself confronted with the challenges of a very diverse global society. In fact, we really are more the same than we are different. Whether you check our genes or our traditions of culture, or even if you actually look at our aspirations. I mean, that should give most of us a sense of comfort and relief, because it really does appear that human nature continually demonstrates over time that we usually end up being a stronger culture when we find ways to embrace both our commonalities and similarities, while we also celebrate the different ways in which they're expressed. Second point, during the time that we have collectively spent constantly lamenting the differences of the millennials from those of us who may be baby boomers or Gen Xers, these millennials have made their marks, are moving on, and have actually given rise to already the next generation, still to be named. Some call them Generation Z or the I generation. You know, they've always lived with iPhones and iPads and things like that. Others call them the global generation, or just simply the post generation. We need to understand more about this up-and-coming cohort, born somewhere between the late 1990s and now, that will help us to know how they will perceive their roles as global stewards and philanthropists. Even more importantly, we are obliged as the elders to span generation gaps to impart the time-proven principles of civic stewardship and ensure that they understand, albeit through their nuanced perceptions, perspectives, and delivery styles. The third thing is, as we speak about philanthropy, what is the future of philanthropy's contribution to societal well-being and global survival? How can the social investments from corporations such as Medtronic and others help to generate sustained change in a manner that goes well beyond mere monetary contribution and promotion of self-serving marketing corporate interests? How must we both prepare the global Jenners for their leadership roles, and how do we prepare ourselves for the new roles and the new ways in which they will approach both local and global citizenship when we pass the reins of responsibility over to them? Together with private foundations, community foundations, family foundations, and individual charitable engagement, what is the role that corporate philanthropy can and should play in helping us reach these global goals, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, that were just ratified by the United Nations just a few weeks ago? How do we realize these goals right here in Ireland? And how do we make an Irish contribution to the rest of the planet, and maybe even beyond? So now that I've delivered my summarized, or what I call my Cliff Notes version of my talk, I feel like now we can all sit back, relax, and really enjoy the fun parts, okay? So I was asked to tell a little bit about myself, and so I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version of who I am. And I think it's probably pretty obvious. I'm a child of the 60s and the 70s, and having been born in the late 1950s, right at the US-Canada border, to a very, very global-minded social worker mother and a social entrepreneur father, it really gave me genetic license to pursue my own commitments to health and human rights through global engagement and diplomacy. My siblings and I were exposed early in life to multiple cultures, to all the cultures that were found in the US and Canada. And we were told that we should not only feel comfortable within each one of them, but that we should, in fact, embrace them all as our own. After all, when you really think about it, there's only one family of man or one family of woman, and we are part of it all. So thanks to my family, we hosted international students who were studying in our communities. As children, we learned Swahili. We even studied Yiddish from a book called Yiddish for Yankees. I mean, that was over and above the fact that we were expected to, be able to speak French, speak Spanish, try our best at English, and realize that if you were a global citizen, you had to be able to speak the global languages of the world. We were exposed to the faiths of the world and entertained within our home diplomats, refugees, academics and orphans, men of faith and women of the night. Like most of us who hail from an African slavery heritage within the New World, we are the offspring of East meets West, of North meets South. So we were taught to embrace it all because, quite honestly, we are composed of it all. And I made a note to myself that I had to mention this. And by the way, one of the things that my mom always required every year was that we all dressed in green on St. Patrick's Day. I've been told that you don't even do that in Ireland. So as a result, my perspective of our role as global citizens was born from very early exposure and very early experience. Global citizenship is literally and figuratively in my genetic makeup. And without a doubt, I think being a university student in the 1970s probably helped further refine my identities and my perspectives. So throughout my early childhood and experiences and family connections, even though a northern kid born at the US-Canadian border, the Caribbean really became home of my affection and my affiliation. And even now, whenever I reach the Caribbean, whether in body or in spirit, I feel like I'm back home. And I could be amongst any of the many cultures of the West Indies and realize that, in fact, that is where I truly belong. And what I find very interesting is I have gotten to get to know Ireland more and better, is that I really find Ireland to be a lot like the Caribbean, okay? Weather, maybe not the same. But I think there really is a truth that somehow island cultures share many commonalities. And so perhaps maybe in that way and for that reason, I always feel very much here at home. So you can tell my concept of home is a very global one. I don't believe that anybody has to belong to only one family or one community. But I guess if I were forced to be part of one, I would have to say that mine is the family of humankind. So we are taught also that to whom much was given, much was required. If we were not part of the solution for making this planet a better place, then we were also actually part of its corruption. We learned to live life with vision and mission, remembering those who came before us. And we also made our success, and they made our successes possible. We also were responsible for those who come behind us and need our help in order to fulfill their destinies. So in effect, we were taught to plan for what type of ancestor we wanted to be. It's probably for those reasons that I've always appreciated hearing individuals and institutions articulate their fundamental, missions and their values and their goals. And I've had the blessed opportunity to work with such organizations as the Centers for Disease Control, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the United Nations, the World Bank, the Ford Foundation. I've worked with some iconic global leaders like President and First Lady Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter, or under the shadows of people like Nelson Mandela, or Chuck Feeney, Ray Murphy, my good friend Bono. And that was just a joke. Though he and I did talk a couple weeks ago, so, we're building that bond, I highly value the fact that contrary to popular thought, one person, one organization, one vision, I've seen it proven, it can, in fact, change the world. So 4 years ago, it was the Medtronic mission and the commitment to it and the reputation for living it that sold me on joining the Medtronic family and the Medtronic Philanthropy. Here's the world's largest medical technology and solutions company, founded in a small Minnesotan garage. Now, by the way, of course, headquartered just a couple kilometers from here in Dublin. Co-founded on the principles of service and community engagement by a guy named Earl Bakken, who as a kid was fascinated by Frankenstein and the power of electricity and how electricity brought life to an individual. Well, that led Earl to create the world's first heart pacemaker. And the story continues from there. So to alleviate pain, to restore health, to extend life, that's the Medtronic mission. And together with really being a good citizen wherever we live and work, each of us 85,000 personal Medtronic philanthropists across the globe, has opportunity to commit ourselves and our passions to collectively strive for exactly that mission as we work and volunteer our time, our talent, and our treasures wherever they're needed and however our hearts are inclined. So through the Medtronic Philanthropy, we're not only committed to contributing to the attainment of the world's sustainable development goals by reducing unnecessary premature death due to non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, stroke, but we are also committed to supporting our global workforce to truly be activated as 85,000 individuals who can make a world of a difference. Somebody was earlier asking what was the meaning of the word philanthropist. What is a philanthropist? That must be somebody who's really, really rich and is giving millions and billions. And when you realize what percentage of people in this world every day live on less than €1 a day, 20% of the world. Do you realize that almost 80% of the world live on less than €7 a day? 10 euros a day. The $1, the £1, the €1 that we contribute each day makes a world of a difference for individuals who have much greater need than we hopefully will ever know. And so our 85,000 personal philanthropists, in whatever way they use their time, their treasure, or their talent, are personal philanthropists, and hopefully so are we. Philanthropy has traditionally played a role in investing in the unknown, the uncertain, and the unpopular, things that conferred opportunities for social change and progress that needed sponsorship for becoming realities. Virtually all social change that we've ever evidenced over the course of human history has been brought about by some human and/or capital investment that has changed the directional course of social tradition. When I think about iconic philanthropies like Mott, like Ford, Rockefeller, the Open Society, Atlantic Philanthropies, they have been over time either extolled or in some cases even condemned for the powerful yet sometimes invisible impacts that they've had upon social development worldwide. In most cases, I truly do believe that history has shown them to have been on the correct side of social change. Corporate philanthropy, however, has often been seen as a very self-serving brand marketing and self-promotion. And yet, had it not been for corporate philanthropy, like Merck Pharmaceutical Company, and its commitment to give free Mectizan drugs to treat river blindness in a partnership that involved the Carter Center, the Centers for Disease Control, and the World Health Organization, had it not been for Merck's contribution, river blindness would continually, unnecessarily debilitate countless lives worldwide. And now it's in the scope of possible eradication. Had we not learned from partnerships like that, we would not have understood the power of public-private, multi-sectoral, whole-of-society partnerships, now seen as the standard aspiration for taking on almost any social problem and challenge, from health to human rights, social justice, climate change, education, disaster response, food or drug safety. Rather than seeing ourselves as sectoral adversaries, we need to regard one another as comrades against a common cause and a common threat, and colleagues toward a shared solution. So as we see ourselves from our similarities and come together bearing our diverse assets, we can find shared solutions for our common challenge. Because the reality is that at the end of the day, politicians and businessmen, community organizers, faith leaders and social activists, male, female, old, young, we all return to live out our lives within the same village and hope for the same peace, security, promise, and joy for ourselves and for those we love. The unique power that corporate philanthropy brings to the social investment table is predicated upon its history of demonstrating that innovative business models can support self-generating sustainable systems for development that do not require reliance upon lifelong charitable contributions from external, sometimes whimsical or controlling interests. Sometimes the investment of human resource capital outlasts and outshadows even cash contribution. So as I talk about our 85,000 personal Medtronic philanthropists, they've proven that. Whether it's their individual community engagement or whether it's corporate volunteerism, perhaps mentoring young in order to teach them vocational skills or social skills, contributing skilled professional expertise in times of disaster or other ill fortunes. Our global workforce today wants to serve the world through its places of employment. In fact, more and more people are choosing employers or consumers are choosing products based upon how these choices afford them the opportunity to meet their needs or desires while also making life better for others. So from selfless contribution to cause marketing through brand selection, corporate philanthropy actually has emerged as a powerful source of self-generating philanthropy that has a capacity to make sustainable social development a possibility in ways that other philanthropic forms have not yet or not before delivered. We must collectively learn how to steer this powerful source to ensure its positive outcomes and responsible applications. I want to shift this conversation a little bit and talk about some of the natures of us as human beings. And we as people have more in common than we do difference. And I can recall during my days in university, not a lot of things I remember, but one thing I do remember is how we used to get together sometimes in the evening, and from all over the world, we would share some of our common experiences in certain, landmark life events. How do you celebrate the birth of a child? How do you, celebrate a marriage? What do you do as you go into adulthood through aging for death? Sometimes some of the most solemn life experiences that seem across cultures can elicit the greatest humor, actually. But it was always impressive to note that no matter how nuanced each story might have been, our practices had more similarities worldwide than they had differences. When humankind used to walk across the continent or sail across the ocean's blue, their bodies were given time to be able to slowly adapt to the changes in time and conditions. Now we're in the jet age, right? So we're jetting back and forth, and now we've added to human experience the experience of jet lag, the difference between evolutionary movement and revolutionary movement. And social development can oftentimes be looked in that same context, the difference between evolutionary social development and revolutionary. Over time, cultures change in every part of the world. Culture, in fact, is really what? But a set of norms, standards, sort of repetitive actions that deliver expected results. That's a little bit different, in fact, maybe just the opposite from insanity, right? Insanity, on the other hand, I'm told, is just about doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. So culture should, therefore, try to help to minimize insanity, right? By enabling the people to know what to expect. In fact, if we maximize consistency and if we can predict expected results with greater and greater accuracy, if we can all look, act, and think the same, it poses fewer challenges or threats. We can predict and we can prejudge. In fact, some might actually say that prejudice is a natural survival instinct. We predict outcome by relying upon lessons learned in the past under similar situations. I think I've learned from a business context that that's what you call Lean Six Sigma. I don't know. But we prejudge in almost every step that we take. Prejudgment or prejudice is based upon stereotypes, assumptions that certain actions or outcomes can be expected because evidence has proved them over and over and over again. And in all reality, survival depends upon a certain amount of both. Because of this, we generally discriminate between actions, events, or even individuals as a result. To be, for instance, a discriminating shopper, or to discriminate between music styles or skills, most of us would say is a desirable skill. A discriminating culture enables and endeavors to protect its citizens. Sometimes it might miss out on new opportunities and perspectives, but it remains within the safe and in the familiar, and thereby it survives. So to discriminate between choices is a culture form of risk assessment for safety and survival. There comes a time, however, when even culture must transform in order to remain relevant and effective. Nelson Mandela used to say to community leaders in South Africa that when culture itself conveys risks to survival, it must give way to new customs. The very thing that afforded social safety might, if kept too long or taken out of balanced context, actually generate risk or vulnerability. And when discrimination is applied against people, it uses a natural principle in an inappropriate manner. Case in point, according to the International Organization of Migration report in 2012, the number of international migrants was estimated at 214 million in 2010. If this number continues to grow at the same pace as during the last 20 years, it could reach 405 million by the year 2050. And currently, with the Syrian refugee challenge that's confronting the world today as an example of unpredicted and uncharted mass migration, we know these earlier estimates are clearly conservative. The US Census Bureau estimates that the entire world population exceeded 7 billion on March 12th, 2012. And don't you always wonder how they know March 12th, 2012? So anyway, even with that denominator, migrants represent a revolutionarily large proportion of our human community. And I'm sure this will be just as relevant to Ireland as much as it is to most other countries across Europe, and indeed across the world. This Syrian crisis is both a local crisis for that country and a global shared challenge for us all. Remember, we are no longer walking or sailing across boundaries. We are now jet-set migrators, relocating at revolutionary speeds. Though we're focused upon the immediate issues of displacement and need, migrations and resettlements are part of the historical way in which human movement has always occurred. And let's face it, refugees and migrants of today become parts of our local social and cultural tapestries of tomorrow. So that's the story of humankind from the beginning. For instance, refugees from Syria are displaced persons today. Over time, they'll become Syrian Jordanian, Syrian Austrian, Syrian American, Syrian Irish. How do we triage for the emergencies and necessities of today and also prepare for the inevitabilities of evolutionary change the population shifts present to us all for tomorrow? And how do we recognize, in fact, really celebrate that these changes in our own cultures and traditions happen in such a way that maximizes outcomes of survival and success for us all? As when my wife and I were living, actually the whole family was living in Switzerland, my wife and I used to have a beautiful garden, rose garden. It was full of hardy red roses. Until one spring when we realized that before we moved there, someone had also planted bulbs for tulips. And that at a certain given moment of the season, lilies would also appear. So initially, beauty for us was defined by those beautiful red, hardy roses, until we realized that the addition of tulips and lilies actually embellished the definition of beauty and the experience of our garden. So if flowers need not be all the same, and yet each add to the beautiful diversity of our landscape, why would we ever consider otherwise for the garden of humanity? This upcoming global generation will be a boundaryless cohort, a mixed bouquet of leaders who hail from one experience and contribute in another. They will take global citizenship for granted. They'll never know a time when social and digital technology was absent, when human rights were not universally expected, or environmental responsibility not the norm. Unlike their millennial parents, I'm told, they will maintain local allegiances while also participating in global action. And less willing to follow the passions of the moment to dictate their philanthropic decisions, These iGens will be expected to hold leadership accountable for fiscal decisions and social outcomes. So they won't follow crowdsourcing. They're going to really be following the delivery of sustainable results. So we can't leave tomorrow in the hands of tomorrow's leaders. We need to mentor them for the road ahead. And I just wanted to read a poem that I thought was very germane to this conversation. Charles Edward Wright put it in these words by giving a little bit of a different view to the half full, half empty story. And it goes like this. It's fine to see the glass half full, I tell her. Just keep evaporation in mind. If the glass is half empty, she answers, you can expect rain. Our planet is quickly transitioning to being one global society. Soon, in fact, we'll be a half-full global community of varying, even conflicting cultures needing to find a symbiotic solution. And even so, we'll remain half-empty, so to speak, with significant, disconnected, disenfranchised, and underserved communities lacking the resources and opportunities that will soon be considered the global expectation. So whether we see tomorrow from the half full or from the half empty perspective, each provides us and the leaders now emerging with the opportunities to define crisis or lack into opportunity or sufficiency. Finding solutions that are relevant to the conditions of all will require the solutions to emanate from the very communities we wish to see served. Them must be us, and we them. And in fact, if you know the basic principles of the Sustainable Development Goals, the attainment of them will rest truly upon our understanding that and living it out. So we already know how to do it, by the way. We learned this a long, long time ago as children. So please indulge with me as I share in closing what I believe is the answer to the complex challenges of globalization or the Sustainable Development Goals or the post-millennial generation or, in fact, actually really life in general. Author Robert Fulghum, as you may know, states it like this. All I ever needed to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned it in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sandpile at Sunday school. These are the things I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life. Learn some and think some and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work some every day. My favorite, take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember that little seed in the styrofoam cup? The roots go down and the plant goes up, and nobody really knows how or why. But we are all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice, and even the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die. So do we. And then remember the Dick and Jane books, which, by the way, I don't remember the Dick and Jane books. And the first word you learned, the biggest word of all, look. You see, everything you need to know is in there somewhere. The golden rule, and love, and basic sanitation, ecology and politics, and equality and sane living. Take any of those items and extrapolate it into sophisticated adult terms and apply it to your family life, or your work, or your government, or your world, and it all holds true and clear and firm. Think what a better world it would be if the whole world, had cookies and milk around 3 o'clock every afternoon and then lay down with our blankies for a nap. Or if all governments had a basic policy to always put things back where they found them and to clean up their own mess. And it is still true, no matter how old you are, when you go out into the world, it is best to hold hands and stick together. So in closing, our role as a global social village is to ensure that we pass along this simple guidance across disparate cultures, geographies, and generations. Each will find effective ways to put this wisdom into action. Our success at local levels will dictate our global outcomes. For at the end of it all, we are but one people, coexisting and interdependent, co-inhabitants of borrowed lands and leased opportunities, holding hands across borders of geographies and generations to ensure our future and to deliver our legacies as good ancestors. After all, as a famous Minnesotan politician once said, we all do better when we all do better. I want to thank you for your indulgence and thank you for welcoming Medtronic into the family and Medtronic Philanthropy as a challenging corporate philanthropy, challenging our partners here in this beautiful Republic of Ireland.